Good morning, everyone. My name is Daniel Scott. I'm a professor at the University of Waterloo in Canada and also at the University of Surrey in the UK. It's my sincere pleasure to be with you this morning and an absolute honor to contribute to Maurice Strong's legacy through this event. Jeffrey's asked me to get us started with a little bit of a discussion on how the climate crisis is going to reshape tourism over the next 30 years or so. And in true Jeffrey style, he's given me about 7 minutes to do that. Um, as all of these images show, climate change isn't some future risk for tourism, it's upon us. It's an increasingly important part of our lived experience, whether it be at home or at the destinations that we visit. And you are part of the next generation of travelers, but also tourism leaders that have a massively important role in creating that climate-friendly travel, that climate-friendly tourism economy that we all want to see. First, let me put the climate crisis into a bit of context of what we've been facing now and over the last couple of years. We all know that COVID has been devastating for the tourism sector. Positively, the rebound has begun and the world of travel is once again bringing us back together. And we have to resist that feeling that, everything that's been wrong for the last little while is going to stay that way. It won't. Defeatism is just as paralyzing to moving forward as is denial. And so the long transformative journey that's required of the climate crisis, it demands us to have a collective resolve to work together towards a vision of a better tourism system that we all know that exists and we want to work towards. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has released its 6th assessment reports that have come out this year, and the United Nations has declared, climate change code red for humanity, a code red for tourism. And importantly, that this is the decisive decade for climate action as well. And you've all probably seen a figure like this that outlines the various choices that we have and the climate futures that will result from those choices. We have at the top end a red line that is a +3 or warmer world, something we can all agree that we don't want to see happen, but that's the path we're on with emissions today. We have the light blue line in the middle. That's where if all the pledges from countries to the Paris Climate Agreement were fulfilled, that would take us into that realm. And then we have at the bottom end, the dark blue line, that is that +2 or even a +1.5 world that the Paris Climate Agreement is working towards, that we all want and we all want to work together. So the question is, what do these different potential futures mean? And importantly, they're all going to transform tourism, but in different ways. And primarily through two challenges that I wanted to bring to you today. So the first challenge that we'll face is carbon risk, sorry. How are we going to decarbonize tourism over the next 30 years so that it can have a place in that net zero economy that we all want to see in the 2050s? And the second challenge is climate risk. How do we adapt to the impacts of a changing climate that we're committed to from past emissions? And how at the same time can we foster a more sustainable and more just tourism system at the same time? So let's take a look at those two challenges, and we'll start with the world that we want to see and what are the implications of that net zero transition for tourism. And what this figure shows is, first of all, tourism carbon emissions today, which are roughly 5–8% of the global total. It also shows you the trajectory of where our emissions, where we estimate they will be, and how those compare to that net zero pledge that was made by the tourism sector through the Glasgow Declaration. So we have this major gap that we have to address over the next 30 years. And so our question is, how and what are the best ways that we're going to do that? Importantly, there are some real scalable solutions that can make this transformation happen. The International Energy Agency gives us one credible roadmap of key strategies that include improving efficiency in hotels, aircraft, the electrification of tour buses and other parts of the tourism system for a clean grid, demand management in some cases, and an important one, sustainable aviation fuels, whether it be through biomass or new synthetic fuels, and modal shifts in some cases, shifting more tourism to electrified buses, to electrified aircraft, and high-speed rail. And we need, real policy, real investment to make this collection of excellent examples that we have here, rather than making them the exceptions. We want these to be the norm. We want these to be mainstreamed over the next decade or so. And we have to do this, not just to decarbonize our operations, but to demonstrate that world leaders, the policymakers on the climate file, that tourism can be part of that net zero economy by mid-century. It won't be easy, it won't be cheap, but we have to look at this as an investment in our social license to be part of that future economy, a carbon constrained economy, and not just, from a cost perspective. Now let's consider the world that we don't want, and that is we might call it a climate disrupted economy. We know that's incompatible with the sustainable development goals. It's incompatible with the kind of sustainable tourism that we want to see. And we don't have time today to go through the wide range of different types of impacts that tourism is seeing and will see increasingly, from weather extremes to sea level rise and even economic or security risks. So instead, let's look at how all of those different kinds of impacts will come together in different parts of the world and what that will mean for tourism around the world. So we can look at a map like this, which is the geography of the combined climate and carbon risk as best as we can estimate it today. It's not perfect, but one of the things that jumps out in front of you when you see this map is how uneven or unfair the impacts that are expected to be in some parts of the world. The highest risk from climate and carbon risk exists in regions of the world where tourism growth is expected to be the strongest. So climate change will pose a sort of headwind for tourism development in parts of Southeast Asia and Africa and Latin America. And even more importantly, when we look at how these impacts, if we look at them through a climate justice lens, we see that, again, some of the biggest impacts are likely to be in the places of the world that rely most on tourism for their economy. And we can't lose sight of this as we develop strategies to adapt and reduce emissions in tourism. We have to keep that climate justice lens in front of us. So with that, bit of context to get us started in our discussion, I want to leave you with two key messages. First, there can be no sustainable tourism or success on the sustainable development goals if we fail on climate. And the second one is, a very wise man reminded us, don't accept that you can't make a difference. What we do as individuals matters. It adds up, especially, and we see that over the last several years, last 3 to 5 years, youth of the world have really found their voice on the climate file. And I encourage you to join those millions that are on the streets and continue to push, what is politically possible, push it closer and closer to what is, we know, scientifically necessary to address the climate crisis. And with that, enjoy the rest of the conference, and I look forward to hearing more from you in the near future. Thank you all. Bye-bye.